Lucas Kitchen, thanks for joining me on the podcast. I really appreciate your time.
I appreciate it too.
I'm excited to talk to you. We have known each other for 25 years, I believe. Is that correct?
Oh, has it been that long?
Yeah.
Wow.
Do you remember such
I did want to take credit for something, which
Okay, go
will
ahead.
probably seem strange. I want to take credit for the existence of your children.
Okay.
Because I introduced you and your wife. And so I think I probably get some credit for everything good that's happened in your life since then. So,
Yeah. Sounds good. I'm glad you went that direction. I didn't know how that was going to turn out.
I actually asked my
kids.
wife if it would be inappropriate to say that. She giggled, and I thought, oh, that probably means it's okay.
Could be.
So, yeah,
No,
happy to be
definitely.
on.
You can credit yourself for, all kinds of things, because I credit you for all kinds of things too. I mean, we've known each other for that long, and really, where I was at that time in my life, I was playing in a little garage band, and you had a home studio, and you approached us about recording, and I thought that's the coolest thing ever. I wanted to record music, and so we went to your home studio, and I had some of the most fun I've ever had. And so
it was a good time. Yeah, and when you say home studio, that's a really generous word for it. It was also in a garage. So you guys being a garage band fit into a garage studio. We literally called it garage studio.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm so glad that I was kind of so the night I saw you guys play was at a graduation thing here in Longview, and you guys were jamming, and you were good, and I was like, you really stood out. But I was also there with a girl that I liked, and I wanted to impress her by, it's like, oh, I want to go talk to the band, and then, and then she came along, and then I was like, well, I guess now I have to, and so I was like, trying to impress her to be like, I've got this studio and I want to record you guys and we'll produce it. Yeah. And I really did mean it. I mean, I really did want to record you guys, but I probably wouldn't have had the nerve to come do that had I not been showing off like a goofball. So I'm really glad she was there, because like it became, what we did together was, we played together in bands over the years and played some silly venues, but also not silly venues, just silly. We did some Battle of the Bands and did them really silly. I remember, coming up with goofy songs for those. And then but also really serious, like worship music. Not that the worship music was overly serious. It was just,
Right. It wasn't
serious,
goofy.
So.
Yeah. No, I honestly, I don't think that we can understate, where that meeting kind of took our lives, Because it did. We joined together in band, in a band later, and went on to do all kinds of ministry and things like that. And so no.
Well, and you know what I remember? I remember how you guys were standing that night. Like you said, 25 years ago.
Super.
I remember
awkward,
Travis was kind of. Yeah,
Just
Travis, the bass player, was standing kind of in the front. He turned out to be quite a business guy, and so he was the one talking. But I remember Matt was the lead singer. His eyes were like huge. And I remember you had a really big shirt. You had like it was like the pinnacle of the 90s thing, although I think it was early 2000s. But you had found shirts that you could drive a semi truck into, I think. They were just these massive shirts that were so cool in like the grunge 90s. And so I just remember just the scene was just it sort of burned into my
we had a style. No, we had a lack of style. Which I won't speak for anybody else but me. But that wasn't on purpose. I wasn't trying to fit into the style of the grunge scene of the 90s. That was just like, I didn't know how to dress, and I was like, here's a shirt. Here's a shirt that two of me could fit in. Literally, if you ever spawned a conjoined twin, you literally could still wear the same shirt. That's
so
true.
You have that as a convenience.
I wanted to be prepared, man. So, no, we definitely had no.
Memories.
We had no stage presence, and there was nothing. I think Matt's songs were good. I really do think that, and that we sang and people could understand the lyrics.
It
that
stood
was
out. Yeah, it was unique. You guys knew what you were doing. It wasn't just a wall of like rusty, grungy sound. It was something specific, and you had something to say. And
Yeah.
It really stood out. Matt's voice reminded me of like I don't know, like Silverchair. You remember
Oh, yeah.
Silverchair? Silverchair? Is the silver? Okay, here's a question.
Okay.
The band Silverchair, do you think that comes from the Narnia stories? Or do you know where their
I
name
think it
comes
does.
from?
Yeah. I
Does
think
it really?
does. Yeah, because those kids were like those kids. They were like my age. They
They
were
were
like
young, weren't they?
they were like 15 when they had their first hit, or maybe one of them was 16. But yeah, so they were young,
Man.
and I think I remember reading that it did because I'm a big Silverchair fan. I mean, I still listen to all their music.
I love their sound.
Like I'm not really like a period music listener. Like I mean, like yeah, I listened to that back in the day when that was the hype. I mean, I genuinely like that music, and so
yeah.
I've listened to Silverchair recently, but I think I do remember reading that was from the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, well,
pretty-
that
pretty
makes
cool.
sense. Yeah.
Which, you
but
know,
they
I-
were not, I would not call them a Christian band, though.
No.
I mean, right? They were pretty far from.
yeah, I never picked up on any evidence that they were a Christian
Yeah.
band or that they were Christians at all. So,
Yeah.
which by the way, back in the day, people our age, whenever we got any little hint that one of those popular bands
Yeah.
maybe had some Christian themes in their music or something spiritual in their music. I mean, I don't know about you, but like, I grabbed onto that and going, maybe they're
Oh, yeah.
Christians, maybe they're believers, so.
Well, yeah, you just sort of want to claim them,
Right.
And, but here's part of why I think it is I think this is probably true for you too. I had parents who were strong believers, which was good, but they were trying to sort out what to allow us to listen to, and so
Yep.
Mom got us this subscription to CCM CD. It was like a CD subscription, and they would send music to us, these big stacks
Okay.
of music that the labels probably just couldn't sell, and they're like, we
Yeah.
got to get rid of these, and these idiots are giving us subscription money, so let's send them a bunch. And so we got music that was Christian that probably nobody has heard of, but they're like the soundtrack of my junior high and high school days.
Yeah.
But the way they would market them would always be like this band sounds like Nirvana, but they're
Right.
Christian, so your parents will allow you to listen to them.
Yeah.
And so that was really the sales pitch. In a lot of ways, was parents would allow it. And
Yeah.
so in East Texas, it was like I want to be in a rock band, and the parents think rock bands play at bars and they get drunk and do drugs, and we say, well, no, Mom, it's a Christian rock band. You're like, well, I have no idea where those bands would even play, or
Right.
what they but.
Right.
Our parents just let us because it was like, well, it's kind of like church related,
Yeah.
And so it really let us explore the whole skill set and kind of avoid some of the more naughty parts
Yeah, no doubt.
of the music scene that probably was going on, but I didn't see it. I mean, there were
Yeah.
lots of Christian bands
There were.
back then.
Yeah, Longview, Kilgore area actually had a scene back in the day, back in
Yeah, it
the
was
late
a lot.
90s, early 2000s, a Christian rock band scene that
Yeah.
I thought was just like, maybe this is normal, but really now looking back, I think it was kind of unique.
Yeah, I do wonder about that. Did other places have that? I don't know. I mean, it was kind of a shaggy, raggedy scene, like an
Oh,
old
yeah.
RV, but it was still. I mean, like the very few. I mean, a lot of church youth groups would let bands play.
Yeah, yeah.
But those weren't established venues, so you kind of had to mine for those. You had to look for those. There were a few venues.
Yeah.
You guys probably were doing the same venue before we met. I'm sure y'all were doing the same things that we were, but there was a couple in Longview and a couple in Kilgore, one in Kilgore that I remember.
Yep.
And man, it was just packed. I mean, kids were dying to be together and have some loud
Yeah.
music. And
Yeah. I mean, I really do want to, just give, well, I was about to say give props, but I mean, I don't know who specifically to give props to, but I mean, there were some churches who recognized, this is a thing and there's not
Yeah.
a venue for this. And so let's make a venue for it. I do remember Andy's Cave in Longview,
Oh, yeah.
St. Andrew's Presbyterian.
I
I
forgot
mean,
about
I don't
that.
think they were very rock and roll themselves, but I mean, they
Yeah.
realized, hey, there's a thing here.
Presbyterian church.
Yeah. Like we need to give a venue and they did it. And there were some great, we had some great times playing there. So
Yeah.
there were some
Well,
great
and
bands.
another neat thing that so like I'm in ministry now, as well. Anyway, I'm in ministry now, and so thinking about things that cross denominational lines, they're actually pretty rare. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
most things that churches do, they're kind of like denominationally locked, but the music thing really spanned because like the venue in Kilgore was in the Wesley Foundation's
Right.
building on the college campus,
Right. Right.
and the same kids that would do they called it the Java Gyra, the same kids that would do that would go over to the one you just mentioned, and what there was one in Liberty City for a little while that was
Okay,
associated with some Baptist folks, and
Yep.
so it was like you had like this crowd that would bounce from place to place, and they didn't care what denomination it was. They just liked being together. I say they is we just liked
Yeah.
being together. We
Yep.
kind of migrated in a group, and it was good times. It was a good way to grow up. I mean, it was
It was.
pretty cool. How old were you guys when y'all started
So
actually playing? Were y'all high school?
I started pretty late. I mean, I started playing guitar when I was 17, and then really, didn't get in the band with the guys until maybe I was 18 or so.
Okay.
And then we were pretty terrible for a period there, and so we really didn't start playing until. We played a couple things when I was 18, but not a whole lot. So, really, late high school, like my late senior
Man.
year, and then right after.
So did you say you started when you were 17?
Yeah. So I got a
wow.
guitar. I got a guitar
I've-
for my 17th birthday. So I kind of a late start. Most kids, you hear about kids starting at 13, 12,
Yeah.
11, So I started when I was 17, and so kind of late,
Okay.
kind of late to figure
Well,
out.
let me just say something, because I met you just a few years after that, not too long after
I
that.
think we
You
met
were
in
probably-
2000. I think
Were
that
you,
graduation.
So how old would you have been then?
I would have been. Well, I guess I would have been 19. So
that-
when we
is it
met, it was at it was at undergrad in Longview
Yeah.
for the graduation. So
Okay, so
I think I would have been 19. So.
word on the street about John Wooten
Oh boy.
was he was. And I'm not just John. I know this will embarrass you, but I'm just going to say,
I'll just
word on
cut
the
it
street
out.
was John was the best guitarist you could find
Oh, boy.
in our area. I mean, really, like of the people I knew, there may have been others, but like,
People that weren't looking very hard, apparently.
well, maybe I mean, who knows? But like you had a unique ability. It didn't even occur to me, now that I think about it, that you had just been playing for a couple of years. So I mean,
Yeah.
did you spend a lot of time? Like, what
Oh,
was
yeah.
what was your practice like?
Well, first let me say thank you for saying that, and then secondly, I'll say I had a few tricks that were like made it sound like I was playing something fast and impressive, but I really didn't have a great knowledge of the guitar, But no, definitely. So I was from Diana, Texas, nothing to do. I was not a party kid, and really I didn't get invited to parties. You talked about not really seeing things.
Yeah,
felt
same
like,
here.
I really
Didn't
felt like
get
God
invited.
protected me from a lot of that. People weren't inviting me
Yeah.
to parties and things. So, once the guitar kind of got fun to me, that took a little while. But once it
Yeah.
kind of got fun and I was able to play along with things on the radio a little bit, I was hooked. And so, I would spend so many, after school, after supper, whatever, I would just be in my room playing guitar. So
Yeah,
there was
okay.
a lot of time put in. But
So that makes sense. Yeah. So you put in time, but you had something innate that. I've played with a lot of people
Oh.
over the years. I don't really play much anymore, but
Stop, Lucas.
But I played with a lot of people over the years, and one of the things that you had that I haven't really seen very often is you pick out chords of other people's songs faster than anybody. Like I've seen. Okay, I'm talking to your audience now. I've seen John
Where they at?
actually play along with songs he hasn't heard, and he hasn't even heard the whole chord progression yet. He's like, oh yeah, it feels like this would be the next chord.
Yeah,
and
well-
boom, he hits it. Now, John has also hit bad notes here and there,
Oh, yeah.
but he knows immediately that he did it, which, like, I'm tone deaf enough that I don't necessarily know if I hit a bad note, So
Come on
John had, you had something. Like, man, I wonder, had you started at 12, you had really good ears for, you had a really good ear for music, a very unique ability.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
And that's not just me. That was the word that people, like when you came up in conversation, that's the thing that people would talk about you. They just recognize that, man, that John guy, he's just good. And really a lot of that was based on the fact that you were doing guitar solos and stuff. They didn't actually see that other part of it, that just kind of sense of picking out riffs and picking out chords and being able to just kind of play along really easily. So I know that embarrasses you, but it was pretty amazing to see, and it was one of the reasons why I was like, I want to work with y'all, way back in the day.
Yeah.
So,
well, I'll get your, so thanks for doing that plug. I'll get your extra $20 for that. I'm writing that down. I really appreciate that. No, there were a lot of guys actually around that were better than me. But
see, only you knew that. You were good enough to know who was better.
Well,
the rest of us were just like, everybody is like, you were in a higher category, and all you really good guys looked just really good to us. We're like, wow, he's as good as those other good guys,
Whatever.
So.
Well, you're a multi-instrumentalist. Whenever I met you, well, first of all, you were like behind the soundboard kind of guy. But then I realized that you play drums and that you'd been recording your own stuff for a while. And that actually you had been recording all kinds of instruments. You play piano, you play guitar, bass, and I'm like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
So I was super impressed by that. So,
but not great.
You and your family.
It was mediocre.
No, it was great. But
for me, it was kind of like I really loved the process of recording.
Yeah.
And I really loved working kind of by myself. And so a more talented team builder probably would have gone out and found more people to produce. But I was like, I was just chasing the sound. I wanted to get like a professional sound, like something you'd hear on the radio. Mm-hmm. And so I would basically write songs so that I had something to record. And the songs, like, to me, honestly didn't really matter much, and they weren't all that great, and it was me singing, and it was like okay. And I'm not just being self-deprecating. I got to the point where I could kind of recognize that I wasn't going to be able to sing like your wife does, for instance, or like I got at least good enough to recognize, okay, I've got my limits, and I can work and work and work, and I'm not gonna progress beyond that. I didn't think I would. I was pretty sure I wouldn't. And that was actually a really important point in my life when I realized that, because what it meant was I would reduce the amount of time I was given to music, and I would give it to other skills that I actually was better at.
Right.
And so I wound up becoming more focused on doing filmmaking and writing books and stuff like that, and really have had a lot more success in that. But all of the music practice and the production practice, it's never wasted. I mean, that's the way I think about skills, is like it's never wasted. You always can use things that you've learned, even if it's just the practice of how to practice. You know?
Yeah.
You can always use that. And so I'm really thankful for those years, even though I don't get up in front of audiences anymore to do music. All of that was really valuable, And man, we met some super awesome people over the years.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, so I want to back up and just say how incredible it was that your parents let you guys dedicate their garage to y'all's
no kidding
music production, because I walked in there and it did not feel like a garage. It was, it was set up with furniture, with like sound deadening equipment. You guys had the little vocal booth set up that was great. And so, having that support, I think was huge too.
It was huge, yeah. I'm reading a book right now. It makes me think of that. It's a Malcolm Gladwell book called Tipping Point. I haven't finished it, so I'm not promoting it, but it has this idea in it. He talks about these, they're kind of like sociology and psychological studies where they followed a number of parents to study their parenting style. And he said, basically, there's two different kinds of parenting styles that fall into these two broad categories. One is the parents treat their kids as if it's up to their kids to figure out the world. And they don't really get involved in their interests. They kind of view it as, oh, yeah, that's cute, but that's their thing, and I'm focused on my thing. But then the other category of parents is the kind of parents I had, and probably you too, and a lot of people we know, is that parents that look for talents in their children, and then they help them figure out how to develop those talents towards some goal. Like I'm going to take you to piano lessons because someday you could be a piano teacher or a professional pianist or something like that.
Right.
That's a different style of parenting that is honestly, as odd as it is, it's more common in families that have disposable income because they have more time. Right. They're not working sun up to sundown and just making ends meet. It's kind of it's a function more of the middle class, honestly. And so that example of my parents allowing us to have the studio, not only did they allow us, but they helped us put the carpet down. They helped us paint it. They helped us. Like my mom drove with me. I was probably 15 or 16, drove me to Guitar Center. We had raised the money ourselves through a job that Dad helped us get.
Okay.
Then Mom drove me to Guitar Center in Dallas to buy our very first Mac G4, whatever we had,
Wow.
And they were just involved at whatever level we wanted them to be involved. The things we couldn't figure out, they'd help us figure out.
Wow.
But they weren't out there recording. They weren't involved like that. I mean, once the noise started, they're like, okay, I'm going in the house, But
that's cool though that they didn't like step in and want to control it though. I mean,
they didn't control anything.
That's pretty unique that they actually.
Yeah, they didn't want that.
It's the first time I'm hearing some of this, like going to Dallas to Guitar Center to get some things. I mean, there's some pretty major things that they facilitated, but then they didn't want to control it. That's interesting.
Yeah, they didn't have any interest in, what they had interest in is seeing us find success in the art forms that we were interested in.
Yeah.
So Dad was a painter. He also taught at the college level, but Dad had his own creative projects going on all the time. And Mom was pretty active in helping him figure out certain aspects when he kind of hit when he needed some help. Mom is just like a researcher, and she just loves solving problems. And so we, growing up, we watched them, mostly Dad kind of focusing on his creative projects, but Mom sometimes being involved to help him solve some of the business style things. He did a lot of it on his own, but she was available. I'd put it that way. She was available. So then when we started getting old enough to have our own creative projects, it was kind of natural. It was kind of the vibe of our family to say, well, what does Lance want to do? Okay, so he wants to do that. Let's see if we can help him do that.
Yeah.
And so they didn't control it. They watched. It was kind of like they watched for gaps that they knew would keep us from progressing, and they would help us figure those gaps out. But at some point, it was just on us. Basically, once the studio was there, it was just on us to figure it out.
Yeah.
They didn't really do anything beyond that.
But they validated
yeah.
the creative output. I mean, that's so, I mean, as I become an adult and, you got to pay bills, you got to be more responsible, you start having kids and all that. There's a big question that's come up in my mind, or I guess at least maybe just a struggle of how do you validate artistic or creative output, or just, creation of artistic content when it doesn't, it's not providing money. It's not actually doing anything to, keep you afloat as far as your income and your family and your mortgage and things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, you were obviously taught, and maybe not even knowing it, you're obviously taught that there's value to that. That there's value to it just because of what? Just because of the artistic content? Was there a spiritual component, like God's a creator?
Oh, well, that's a good one too.
Was any of that spoken in your household, or was it just kind of?
Well, it was definitely demonstrated. I mean, we watched Dad paint for money. Who paints for money? And I don't mean like a house painter. I mean like sometimes it was portraits. Like one time he got a job doing paintings of log cabins for Satterwhite Home Log Cabin Company, and he did so many of them, and he got paid pretty good for it, And so we would sort of wander through the studio and see him doing that, and we would kind of take up positions around his art table with crayons, and it was just we were around a person who had a very unique artistic ability, and offered it for hire, and he also is incredibly musical, by the way. A lot of people don't realize that about him. He led music at our church. He has a similar thing to what I said about you, in that he can sit down at a piano or a guitar, and he can sing and play a song that he heard 40 years ago. Now, he won't remember the words. He'll have to look the words up, but
that's
the music
the music
just comes to him. So
I didn't know that about your dad. I mean,
Oh yeah,
how did I not
he's
know
fun
that?
to play with. If you just like start playing something, he can play along with it. He's very
Interesting.
musical. So my brother's got more of that from him, I think, because that's not as much in my wheelhouse. But anyway, so what we saw him doing creative things for hire, and then we also saw him leading music at church, and it was fun. Like our family gatherings basically are like pull out some guitars and let's make some noise. You know?
That's great.
And so then the studio kind of was an extension of that. It kind of made sense, and we actually did sometimes charge for recording, but not usually. Usually it was just like projects we wanted to work on.
Yeah.
My little brother had a lot of bands over the years, some rap groups that he was in, and and so a lot of it was just personal projects. But it's like for a painter, all you need basically is a paintbrush and some paints. But for recording, at the time, you needed a lot more stuff,
Right.
And so it was sort of like he was helping us. He and Mom helped us figure out how to get the paintbrush for music, and it was just a much more technical, big paintbrush, so to speak.
Right.
And then after that, it was just up to us to take it, and man, we met some good people doing it. I'm so glad we did it. I mean, y'all's story is not the only one of great folks that we connected with.
Sure.
Through that, and so man, it was so valuable. And so okay. I'm getting off of what you're asking, though. How do you validate
It's all good.
things that aren't making money? I think one way is, like the other thing you said, is the spiritual value. Things that don't make money but have spiritual value are worth doing. Things also that give you fulfillment are worth doing. I heard the other day that the formula for fulfillment. Oh man, but I can't remember what it was. So who knows? How are we ever going to get fulfilled? I can't remember how it went. But
Maybe
anyway, the point is, it's worth pursuing fulfillment, even for people that are outside of the genres we're talking. I mean, the art forms we're talking about. Pursuing fulfillment can be its own thing. I don't know. How do you do it? I mean, like, how do you?
Well,
I mean,
that's been something that I've struggled with. I mean that's been something that it's a personal internal struggle, because the things that we're talking about doing, like you mentioned, it's a big paintbrush, having a recording studio. These things cost money. These things
expensive,
take a lot of time. I told my wife, I've said many times, I said, the things that I love doing, take a long time to do. They cost a lot of money, and they don't make any money, because music, recording, things like that, because I really got into recording by being around you. And then I got into, I worked at a print shop in Lubbock, and I got into using these old printing presses. And so I loved doing that.
Yeah.
But it's like a long, arduous process
it is,
to get something done, and there's not a whole lot of demand for it. So, I was like, why do the things that I love doing take forever and not have any return on them, But there's been a big struggle in me, like, well, okay, how do you justify? Because I'm, you start to see the world through, I got to pay the bills, I got to do this.
Yeah.
And there's only so much time in the day. How do I fit something that I enjoy in that's just selfish, But I mean, I enjoy art. I enjoy things that people have made, that they have loved to make. And so, I see the value in it, but it's just hard to know how to spend your time wisely in doing it, because you don't want to let it go. You don't want to feel like you're just letting it die.
I don't think you should let it go, definitely.
So I don't have an answer. I was wondering what you thought about it, honestly.
I have another idea of something I've tried, which was very satisfying, but it can't work at any age, but okay, so one of my passions that doesn't get an opportunity to express itself much is filmmaking. I used to have a video business, and what drove the interest in having a video business was I dreamed about making films, but like indie films, and local, but just like making like sci-fi and fantasy style films.
Which you have made some films, by the way.
I made some, and realized it wasn't the best fit for me, because I'm such a loner when I'm doing creative stuff. I really prefer to get in a closet and write. Like, I love the writing process, but I needed to do it to learn that. But anyway.
Okay.
So film is something that I like doing occasionally, especially if it's something creative. And one way to validate it is to do it with your kids. And so this last summer, I decided to do what I called, I think I called it something like Daddy Media Camp or something.
Okay.
And it was just with my older two. I have 4 kids. Two of them were really too young to stay focused. But with the older two, they would come up to the studio for an hour, at least an hour a day. And we worked on them learning how to write and record audio. And so, but for me, learning a media skill is always project-based. You don't learn it in a vacuum. You say, here's the project I want to make, and I'll just happen to learn the steps along the way. And so I said, okay, we're going to make a funny storytelling kind of podcast. We started with that. And it was off the wall crazy, but it was a lot of fun. And so that validated that time of doing something that was really nothing that anybody else has heard. And then after that, about halfway through the summer, I thought, wait a minute, why don't we make a film? Let's make and Daddy went a little overboard.
Sure,
Daddy,
why not?
Daddy went a little ambitious, but they are so proud of it. And I mean, and like we did it like as professional as I could fit into the time we had.
Right.
We had some special effects. We had a car scene. Them driving a car scene.
Nice.
But we did it. We did it in special effects. They weren't actually driving. And so they got to kind of be involved in it. And had I just been out there by myself making a film and away from the family, all on my own, I would have felt guilty because I'm taking time away from my family. This is not going to make any money. Very few people will probably see it. It's just a passion project for me. But as soon as my kids were involved, it's family time, And so that's one idea. Now, for some people,
that's good.
Yeah, for some people, they're like, but would I really like being a bouncer at a bar? It's like, well, you can't bring your kids to do that, So I don't know. It doesn't work for everything. But for some things...
That means you just like to fight, right? So what is it?
You just like to fight.
Start the Family Fight Club or something like that?
Family Fight Club. Yeah. So I don't know. That's another idea. It's like, how do you... But maybe it's not just with your kids. It's like, how could you take your art form and make it into a valued relationship creation thing, where it's like... And I think to some extent that's what a band is. Like I'm making lifelong friends when we sit down and jam.
Right.
At least I hope. Some of the band members I've had over the years I've never talked to again. But but pretty much most of my longest friends have been people that I was in bands with.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty true.
Yeah.
Even bands that weren't very good. Some of them, it really was about our relationship. It was about our friendship.
Right.
We weren't gamers, so we had to do something. We made music.
Right. Right. So, So backing up a little bit, is the kid podcast that y'all made, is it still available anywhere? Is it online?
Okay, the podcast. Because the podcast, no, but the movie is, and it's the thing that's worth seeing because.
Where can people find that?
They can. It's called The Grown-Ups Are Gone. I'm on YouTube. If you go on YouTube, I'm at lucas.kitchen on YouTube. So it'd be youtube.com/@lucas.kitchen. It's called The Grown-Ups Are Gone. Okay. The cool thing about it, let me pitch it. The cool thing about it is they actually wrote the script. And so what I forced them to do, and I'm using the word forced, that's probably too strong because they laughed and giggled the whole time through it. But I said, we're going to do it like we do it if we were getting hired to produce a real movie. We're going to write the script first. We're going to scout our locations. We're going to do wardrobe. We're going to go through the whole thing.
So cool.
And it all was, of course, abbreviated. But what they came up with was it has some part of it is just silly kid stuff, but it actually has a message in it, and my kids are like at the time I think were 7 and 9, so that gives you a sense of kind of where they are.
Man, that's so much fun.
What we actually came up with, we had a big backyard movie screening party right toward the end of summer. Bunch of their friends came. I think we had 75 people come. A bunch of their friends came, and we showed the movie in the backyard on a big projection screen, and great memory for them. I don't know if they'll grow up to be filmmakers. Maybe not. Maybe they will. I don't know. But if they want to, they have access to
Yeah.
they know how to learn it now.
Yep.
They don't know what they need to know if they want to be professional, but they know that they can learn it. They
Right.
realize that they can achieve some big project, you
Right.
know, and they know what it feels like to do that. And so
Well, and you know as much as I do that if you really want to do something, you're going to learn how to do it.
you'll learn it, yeah.
You're going to learn it, you know, which
Yeah.
is why, you know, I mean, I think a lot of people nowadays are saying, you know, college, how important is that for me? Because if you have a passion about something, you're going to learn, you're going to dive
You'll
deep
learn it,
into it.
yeah.
And learn it. And even if they don't grow
Yeah.
up to be filmmakers or even want to do that, that's probably some of the best memories that they're going to have.
Oh yeah,
you know?
I mean, at least
that's
with
so
me,
great.
yeah. because I'm in such a good mood. I can be kind of a grumpy dad if there's nothing that we're
What?
accomplishing.
Not
well,
me.
so yeah,
Not
so
me.
yeah, so the grumpy thing, I've started to identify. Hopefully, this is worth talking about. This is a dad podcast.
Oh, I think so. Definitely.
So I've started to identify that my grumpiness often, not always, but often, I'm most sharply grumpy when there's not something to accomplish happening. I find myself like my studio where all of my fun gadgets are. It's not in the house. It's a separated building.
Right.
And I've sectioned off time for family, you know, in the evenings. But it's difficult for me sometimes to shift gears to doing what feels like nothing. Now it's not nothing. It's being with the kids.
Right.
But if I am coming out of like project mode, you know, I was getting like a lot of dopamine doing my project, and then I try to shift quickly into like kid time with the kids.
Right.
I wind up kind of pacing back and forth like a caged animal and feeling a little grumpy. And so
Yeah.
the thing that I keep thinking about and trying to figure out is do things with the kids.
Yeah.
You know, if they're doing Legos, do Legos or whatever, you know, try to be involved in what they're doing, because then I can get engaged with that and I can kind of like come alongside them rather than feeling like I'm constantly just, you know, kind of annoyed. Not constantly, but, you know.
Yeah, but which that takes a lot of effort. I mean, that's easy for you to say that. Yeah,
It
just,
is.
Just join in with
Yeah.
what the kids are doing, but that takes a lot of effort. I mean,
Yeah, as they get older, it's easier, but I suspect that as they get older than they are now, it will get harder probably depending on what they want to do. But like, okay,
Right.
so some examples are, we're trying this. We've tried to shift screen time, for instance, to being family screen time, which is pretty tough.
Right.
Like we do have a video game console, but we've just kind of recently said, okay, for video game time, we're going to have it on a schedule, because they'll drive you nuts by just
yeah.
asking, can I
yeah.
play videos? Can I play video games? And
No
so
doubt.
what we shifted to, which has worked amazingly, is to let them know when during the week they're going to get to play.
Yep.
I've come to believe that not playing every day is valuable, because they need to have days. I think they need to have days where they have this entire day where they know they just don't get to play. That's really good practice for them, I think. The other thing that we're trying more recently is to try to do it as a family. Like when we sit down and play video games, and this one's hard because sometimes the games they want to play or the TV shows they want to watch, like mommy and daddy are like, oh, golly,
yeah.
you know. And so sometimes we don't do that very well. But our official, like on the books rule is, yes, we can do video games and we can do screen time, but we want most of that to be family oriented.
Yeah.
So
That's good. I mean, I think
it doesn't always go that way, but it does
Right.
seem to be more healthy, because then it's kind of like we're doing something that's, you know, meaningful for more than just entertainment purposes.
yeah.
You know,
Well, and good.
how do
good-
y'all deal
good for you
with
guys.
that? Like,
Well, let me just first say good for you guys, because I know, again, that takes effort for you guys to
Yeah.
uphold that and to stick with that takes effort. Because I mean, I don't know if your kids are like some of mine, but some of mine they'll beg until they wear you down. You know, well, but what about this? Well, you see, yesterday I
Yeah.
didn't get to do this because. So
yeah, oh yeah,
So you know,
it takes a
that's-
long,
that's
like
tough.
it took us a long time to get past that phase.
Yeah.
And that's why I said I think they need days where they know for a fact you will not get it today, but not because you're in trouble, just because this is not a video game day.
Yeah.
So we read this. My wife and I read this book a while back, and I can't remember what it's called, but he had this great concept in it where he said, you want to let, this is related, you want to let the consequence be the teacher. And then he kind of built out from that where he would say, well, what you do is you have these rules, and then the rules that everybody agrees on in your household. It doesn't work with babies, of course, but like as they get older, they're like rules that everybody agrees on, and you involve them in the rule making process, and then the kids agree on it, like, yeah, that sounds good. I'll go with that. And then when they start running up against that rule, like I want to play video games, you then blame the rule and be like, I'm so sorry. It's like, but that it's,
Right,
so then the rule is the bad guy, not me. Like I'm not deciding. We decided together. This is the rule.
That's true. That's
and so
true.
you kind of like displace the, I wish I could remember the terminology he actually used, but you sort of displace the blame from yourself as the parent to that rule. And then if there's a consequence, to the consequence. And this is one that me and my wife struggle with a lot because we want to save our kids from the consequences we see coming. Like if it's a cold day
Right.
and my kid doesn't have a coat, well, what I want to do is save him from the trouble I see coming. But what this author said, and it was pretty amazing to try this, was let him go without a coat, and then they will
Right.
begin to determine that they need to, that consequence becomes the teacher. Now, if the consequence is like he's going to get a nail through his brain, well, of course we're going to stop that.
Right.
There's a limit. But
Right. No, I love that, man, because I think that's just training them for adulthood, because there
it
are
is.
so many parameters, so many consequences that we don't choose. Now, I understand we live in a country where we can vote on things and vote in laws and all that, but there's a lot of people who vote for things that don't get put in place. And so there are just parameters that sometimes you don't want.
Yeah,
and so you're
absolutely.
teaching your child, like, sometimes that's just the case.
Yeah.
If there's something worth fighting for, sure, fight for change if you need to, but like, don't fight to have something changed just because you feel like you deserve it. Or don't fight for something that doesn't actually matter. Sometimes there are consequences that you just have to deal with. And so,
well, and that's
that.
That's one of the things I struggle with is I find myself making arbitrary rules, and I have no idea. Without a little bit of analytics, I have no idea why I just told, don't stand on the couch.
right.
Now, on the surface of it, that sounds like, well, yeah, that should probably be a rule. But if I analyze why I just made that rule arbitrarily, like why couldn't they stand on the couch exactly?
Right.
Well, if I'm being completely honest, it's because it really inconveniences me and makes me mad when he falls off the couch and hits his head.
Right.
And that's a little embarrassing to admit. It's not because I don't want him to get hurt. Like if he gets hurt when mom's watching him, I'm out of the house. Yeah, that's kind of too bad, but I know it just is going to happen. I don't want him to get hurt when I'm around because it inconveniences me. It makes me upset. I have like an adrenaline response that kind of results in anger. And so I'll make these arbitrary rules that I then have to back up because then if he continues to stay on the couch,
Right.
Based on this arbitrary rule that was unneeded that I made, then now I've got to give a discipline. And so it becomes this thing where it's like, I don't want to fall into that cycle. And so having like agreed upon rules and like really trying to avoid making new rules is pretty tough for me. It is pretty hard. I just want to kind of do that on the fly. But anyway, I don't know.
No,
we're figuring it out. Our kids are young, and we'll probably find out that we did it wrong later.
No, I doubt it. But I am of the natural mindset of like just making up a rule and just because I said so. That's my I fall into that. And so what is it about? Maybe it's a dad thing because I've actually talked to other dads about this. Whenever the kid trips and falls and gets hurt, why am I upset about it? Because that happens to me too. And I'm thinking this feels like the most selfish,
it does.
Attitude that I can have. And I think some of it is tied to, well, I told you not to do that. And see, there you go. It happened. See.
Yeah.
That thing about that's why I told you not to do that. But I wonder. It's got to be a lot about inconveniencing me.
I think that
and that's kind of tough. But like you said, it's embarrassing to admit. I just want to let you know, I'm the same way.
Yeah.
I've talked to other dads who feel the same way. I don't understand why it is, but
Well, and it's hard for Mama to understand, I think too.
Yeah.
Like she's asked me,
Sure.
"Why are you mad?" I mean, it's him that just crushed his finger in the door, and like the other day. Okay, so I'm trying to use less profanity. Like I'm a pastor and I'm a Christian author, but like in my private life, I have these bursts of anger and I use profanity. I'm trying to use less profanity,
Okay.
and so. Part of that's because I have kids around and I want to
Sure.
set a good example, but also I
Right.
just want to be right with the Lord. And there are probably circumstances where profanity is not like a sin, but like for me, it's way easier just to say, you know what, let's just treat it all like it's a sin, and I'll try to
Sure.
put it in the past. So anyway, the other day, my youngest, who is like 1 and some change, I don't know, he might have almost be 2, or he might be 3, I don't know, but he's like baby-ish, but
you don't know the number of months? Like he's 32
no, I don't know
and a half
how
months?
old he is. He's over 1 year because we had some party at some point for him,
Right.
and he's not going to remember that, and I still paid for it.
That's
so
right.
I'm not bitter about that. But he's ambulating around the house, and he's
Okay.
very mobile and everything. But he likes to climb. He's climbing. And he fell the other day, and he just kind of grazed his head on something hard, but he really wasn't hurt that bad. But I saw it happen, and what it did for me is it gave me an immediate adrenaline rush. And here's my theory. I mean, you asked, so here's my theory: is a mother's role generally is to nurture. A father's role is generally to protect, and to some extent nurture, but like to protect from dangers.
Right.
Sometimes the danger is his own motor skills,
Right.
And so when I see him being hurt, I have an adrenaline response, and that adrenaline response results in fight or flight. Most of the time for your kids, you will fight. You don't run away if your kids are hurt. So you
Right.
stand there, and your body is having a physiological fight response. But you can't point that fight response at the child. Well, you can, but it's not good. So you can't point your fight response to the child. And so
Right.
it has nowhere to go other than, for me, shouting something. And
Right.
a lot of times not profanity when the kids are around, but sometimes it has been,
Right.
just kind of like out of the fight adrenaline response to seeing him hurt. Now, if it's somebody else hurting him, I would then direct that fight response toward the brat
Right.
that's hurting him. But if it's him and there's no one it's like a pressure vessel that just has nowhere to go. I actually think it's pretty natural. I don't think it's unnatural. But it is part of, as believers at least, it's part of us figuring out how to have self-control. Because I think God
Right.
made us to be able to respond aggressively when needed,
Sure.
but we have to figure out how to have that fight response and not point it back at the kid.
You
which
got to
is
realize.
what I do. I mean,
you
that's
got to
what I do a
realize
lot of
that
times.
the child is not the appropriate recipient of your.
That's a good way to put it.
Fight
Yes.
fight response,
Yeah.
and who knows? There's not one in that situation, which is very
Yeah.
interesting. So there is a lot of self-control there.
Yeah.
But interesting, very interesting, man.
But that's just a theory. I don't know. Somebody
Yeah.
some psychologist probably has a better take on it. But that's
Oh,
just
sure.
kind of
There's
what I noticed.
there's people who are smart that got this all figured out, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Oh, and let me finish that story so I don't leave it dangling. So he hits his head. It's not a big deal. The bigger response was that he cried a bit, but the bigger response was from me. I literally shouted at the top of my lungs, not a cuss word. Give me a point for that.
Good for you.
But it was like the Visigoths were invading from the east, and I was fighting for the city. I mean, it was like
Yeah.
a war cry. But it was after it happened. It wasn't like in response to tell him don't fall or something. It was like after it happened. That was my release. That was my adrenaline letting itself out the release hatch of my mouth. And
Right.
it probably scared him to death because he fell, hit his head, and then Daddy's standing over him going, "Rah!"
Right. Right.
And so it was not like I want to not do that. I want to get to where that's not what I do when he hurts himself. I mean, poor guy. I mean, he hurt himself, and Daddy's having a weird meltdown over here.
Right.
So
Yeah. So what
I
are
don't
you
know.
teaching the child, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, and then if I get mad because he throws a fit, well, he saw me do it, you know? So, because that's kind of what it is. It's sort of like a big momentary fit that I threw because he fell down. Well, then if I get mad later because he's throwing a fit over something different, like he's seeing it demonstrated by me.
Right.
So in a way, I'm giving him permission and then taking that permission away verbally. You know, like I gave him permission visually, he saw me do it, and now I'm saying, don't do that. It's like,
Right.
well, that's really confusing,
Right.
you know,
Right.
for a kid.
Yeah.
So
man,
anyway,
that's
it's
great insight,
always
yeah.
going to be imperfect if we've got a sin nature. You know, we just
Definitely.
it's just going to be that way. But
Okay, so I do want to talk about your ministry journey.
okay, yeah,
And so going back, whenever we were in the band together, and the band I'm talking about is we were called Pearl Merchant.
Yeah.
And so you were our drummer, and then you were recording stuff, and so you actually met my wife Lainey before me. Y'all met in college and started to collaborate musically together. She was recording some stuff at your place,
yeah,
and then we formed a band.
yeah,
So, and you know, it was during that time that I realized that you were really kind of drawn to more than just playing drums, more than just the music
Yeah.
part of it. You know, you really
Yeah.
wanted to preach. I mean, there were some things that we led worship at that you were the preacher or speaker
yeah,
at, and so, you know, and of course, I was so laser focused on, I just wanted to do music. You know, no matter what it was, I just wanted to do music, and at some point, I think you were. Whenever you left, we all moved out to West Texas. We all moved out to Lubbock
Yeah.
together. The whole band did. And then at some point you were like, you know what? Well, you were feeling called, you know, to do different types of ministry. And so
Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, like, you know, I couldn't see, I was like, music was it for me. That's all I wanted to do.
oh yeah, okay,
But you went and did some videography, you know, like, and it seemed to kind of be on a journey to find out what you felt you were really called to do.
yeah.
You know, you want to talk about that journey a little bit, like
Yeah,
while you
sure.
were with the band?
Well, and it's worth giving credit to. He's passed now, but really, I left the band kind of on the suggestion of John Randalls. Now, he didn't
Okay.
say you should leave the band,
Right.
but John Randalls was a guy that you and I knew, of course, from doing events. We did a summer camp called Reach in Arkadelphia, Arkansas, years ago, and he was the speaker there, and we thought he was great, but we didn't really know much about him. But we learned that he was leading this big college worship and teaching time in Lubbock. So we started to get to know him and did a number of a number of events with him, and then he kind of allowed us to be invited to come do music out there. Well.
Yep.
In him, I saw a real opportunity to learn from someone who was doing basically what I thought I wanted to do. He was on the road constantly teaching. His focus was discipleship. He was just he talked endlessly about discipleship and was such a brilliant speaker. And he gave you the sense that it was just sort of off the cuff, but he was so good at it that, you know, it was just mesmerizing. And so I kind of started following him around for a while and did some, you know, kind of, he had some revivals in the West Texas area that I'd go to, and we'd drive together and we'd talk about ministry. And anyway, one of the suggestions, I said, well, how would I get to where I'm actually able to speak, you know, and because I had done some youth ministry, but he said, well, the best path probably for where you are at your age is to go back into youth ministry and to just hone your craft and get good at it, you know, and start making yourself available. And I had no contacts in Lubbock. I did apply for some jobs in Lubbock at churches, but I was young and skinny and unmarried and skinny. Did I say skinny?
Yeah.
I was really skinny.
Youth pastor can't be skinny, I don't think, right?
Yeah, you got to have a big, robust youth pastor. I don't know. So, but it just didn't work out there. So I moved back to where I had contacts for the summer, thinking, okay, I'll go back. I'll do youth ministry with a guy in Tyler that I knew who's always kind of had like an open job for me if I ever wanted it.
Yeah.
And went and did that. And at the end of the summer, I realized it wasn't like the youth ministry job was the dream, but it felt like I'm heading towards something now. I'm heading
Right.
towards the thing that I really want to do. But it was hard to quit the band. Now, I think the guys y'all played with after me were musically a lot better. Like Brian, man, that dude can sing and he's got a vision for.
Yeah, he's good.
He's
good.
I remember you playing with a guy named Justin Lintz, I think, who was fantastic.
He's good too.
And so what I saw was like musically, it was an improvement over me. I mean, like when I was at the Kit, well, I was okay, but like when I was at the Kit, we were constantly speeding up. It was like Lainey would start the music, and then like by the end of it, I'm just like bouncing, and we're going 900 miles an hour.
Yeah.
So anyway,
This
didn't
is
feel
before
like
the days of click tracks and all that stuff.
Yeah, we weren't
nowadays,
playing click tracks.
You got all kinds of tracks.
And so
going on.
I didn't feel like. I felt like you guys were going to be totally fine. Finding a drummer in Lubbock, no big deal, right? I mean,
Right.
at least that's what I figured. So I figured
Right.
like, you're going to be fine without me. But what I really missed was being with my friends.
Sure,
I mean, that
sure.
was the hard part because in Tyler, I was so lonely because I was building a new, kind of a new friend group. But that was a period of time where I was figuring out what am I going to do in my life? What am I good at? I was unmarried still, so I was kind of on the lookout for a wife. And so I did youth ministry there for a while and then got into doing in the communication ministry in the church where I was. And then I took about 8 years I quit ministry and I just did media. I had a media business. I did video, graphic design, web, but most of my clients were churches and people I knew from honestly our music days because we had met a lot of people traveling around and so that allowed me to do that and kind of sharpen some skills. And then when I was ready to get back into ministry, and I got married in that time. I started writing sci-fi books in that time. I had a fair amount of free time. And I was a terrible English student, but I had all these ideas that I thought I was going to make into films. And then I started to realize budget for film is insane, and you've got to have a big team. And it's like, I guess that's not a fit for me. So I started converting those film ideas into novels. Okay. And so I wrote a number of books that were sort of Christian adjacent. They're not really Christian fiction exactly, but they were Christian friendly. For the most part.
I mean, Christian. Like had a spiritual component there.
There's a spiritual component. It was a little bit hidden back then. It was not as explicit, but it was like a Christian could pick up on it, but a non-Christian might read it and think, oh, that's just a fantasy or a sci-fi book.
Which let me stop you there and just like maybe talk about that. I mean, so that was kind of a thing. I mean, for even like a songwriter thinking about getting songs out into the public. I mean, like what we had experienced as far as Christian art, like Christian music, Christian film, a lot of it was cheesy, right? And so, I mean, for me, which I'm not speaking for you, this is kind of my thought.
No, that's definitely the case, yeah.
A lot of
I'm
it was
Carmen.
Remember
Carmen?
Yeah. So my thought was, okay, well, I want something to be not cheesy. And so I guess mistakenly I thought, well, the message has to be kind of, not obscured, but I mean, maybe not straight in your face, And so,
sure.
I kind of, I wonder if you had that same thought making that, because I had that thought about music,
Yeah, at the time. I've shifted over the years, but at the time, that was the same feeling I had with writing was, okay, so it's a big thing in publishing. It's like what they'll call it is they're writing for broad market or mass market, but they're into Christian, there's like Christian publishers and they specialize in, books for a broad market, but they call themselves Christian. And what they're doing is they know what triggers a Christian to not like the book, and they leave that stuff out. But then other than that, it's just like a fantasy book or it's a sci-fi book. So here's the oddity of it is, and I think this happens in music too, is when somebody says, is that a Christian song or a Christian artist or a Christian author or a Christian book, there's a range of things that they could mean by that. One is it just family friendly? Like, does it have cuss words in it?
Right.
That they could mean that. Another category could be, is it made by a Christian? Maybe it doesn't have any discernible Christian anything in it, but is it just made by a Christian who's
Right.
a believer? Another one, a possibility they could mean by that is like, does it have a Christian message in it? And that would be like the item is actually trying to either teach something or promote something or encourage along the lines of like Christian messaging. And then a fourth, which is similar to that one but is a little bit different, is if it's fiction, are the characters Christian? Because you could have a Christian character who isn't really talking about their faith, but you just know that they're Christian because of a mention here or there. So when somebody says, is it Christian, like three of those really overlap with how we talk about Christian music too. Is is it just like there's Christians who make music like Justin Bieber.
You're Christians in a band versus a Christian band.
There you go.
We're talking about that. Yeah.
So there's so really it's kind of like what do we really mean by that? Mm-hmm. And then there's also big questions on what is Christian. Like if you are doing, like what makes it Christian? Like there's no Christian McDonald's as far as I know. And so it is a little difficult to sort out what exactly makes it Christian.
Well, and with things like Chick-fil-A, you can see where they.
Oh yeah, Chick-fil-A seems Christian.
But
that's true.
but that has been kind of confused along the way, because whenever I guess their leadership has taken stances on things,
Yeah.
Some people have been surprised by that, and some people have been like, well, no, they're a Christian-owned business. But what does that actually mean? I mean, it is kind of interesting what do we all think that means? It's kind of confused. So anyway,
so my thought, I'm wondering if you were kind of feeling the same thing. My thought when I was starting to write books was that message-driven fiction was going to have no market, I wonder, do you think that was the same with the music? Do you think it was really about the marketing of it? Or like what do you think drives it on the music side of it?
I mean, that was definitely a thought as far as what. So I guess at some point I was thinking, well, I want to reach people with the gospel. And so, with music, like it can't be just super overt, with the message, but I want the message in there. So I was always trying to figure out, and I'm talking days back in the day whenever I was trying to write songs and things like that.
Yeah.
That was a thought in my mind. Well, I want the message to be there, but I don't want a non-believer to hear overly Christian or biblical terms and words and say, that's just a Christian song, and just immediately
it's not for me
it.
or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So I really don't know. I mean, I guess I would think that there's a range. And hearing you talk about the book side of it, that's interesting. There seems to be a lot of thought put into what those categories are. Like there seems to be a range of Christian when it comes to books.
Yeah.
And so, I really don't know. I think there is your CCM, your contemporary Christian music genre that you're going to hear on Air One, you're going to hear on these stations, K-Love, and what you're getting. Like that's why you're tuning in, which is interesting, because I've actually had the thought that people are going to tune into that station whether the music is good or not. I mean, like I've known people, to like listen to some of this music, and I'm thinking I don't think that they like the style of music, but it's the Christian station, Anyway, but
it's what's safe. Yeah, there's the safety listener. Yeah,
but I don't really know. I mean, I would love to know what a good, mixture is of like how to make a song, appealing to a broad audience, and then have the message of the gospel in there.
Well, okay, so I've shifted how I think about it now. Okay, so I think that concern is based on what I would call the fear of scarcity in the audience. Okay, so like let's just say, so like when we were playing the local music scene, one thing we had to think about is, there's maybe like 200 kids that will show up for a show, right? And so the audience was really scarce, and so you didn't want to give that audience something that you that they didn't like because there weren't many of them, and you might run them off. The difference in now having the internet and access to literally billions of people is that there is no scarcity for basically whatever you want to do. So So my most
Interesting.
popular book has been a very message driven sci-fi book. It's called Missionary to Mars. He's a very outspoken missionary who's going to he's doing mission work in the future. It's sci-fi, so it's
Yeah.
futuristic, it's speculative, but it is so message driven. He just has he preaches in the book. It's not preachy though. It's not like long passages of preaching. It's just
Right.
you know what he's doing,
Right.
and you hear at least a couple of times his gospel presentation, but it's not focused on that. The focus is the action, and it's supposed to be fun. But that's the most popular book that I've done, and what it taught me, I think, is that if you do the broad market stuff, there's an audience for that. If you do the message-driven stuff, there's an audience for that. Now, you do have to try to figure out how to reach that audience. Like
Sure.
if you're doing worship music, it's a little bit easier to know how to reach that audience because they're sitting in churches every Sunday.
Right.
If you're
Right.
doing heavy metal, like doing the Psalms to heavy metal, well, there's a market for that somewhere, but I don't
Yeah.
know how you find it.
Right.
So there's some work on the back end. I think a lot of times what we do is we take the easy route for the markets we know, and we shape our stuff around that.
Sure. Yeah.
Not because we don't have the confidence to say, I'll figure out where the market is.
Right.
And that's a challenge. And I have so little knowledge of how to solve that for the music. The music side of things. I don't have a
Sure.
whole lot of knowledge to solve it for the book thing, but I'm learning. I mean, that's
Yeah.
kind of the phase I'm in. I'm still learning. How do I reach those people that want a very message-driven, message-centric thing? I think a lot of times it's parents, and that may be true
Okay.
in music too. You think about the CCM thing. My mom was the conduit for me to be listening to Guardian and Bride and POD and all of those. It was really my mom that did that because and those are Christian bands, by the way, for anybody that hadn't heard of 90s, metal. She wanted us to be hearing a good message, but she knew that we wanted something heavy, and so she was the conduit there for pretty explicit Christian lyrics. I mean, they were very Christian.
Yeah.
POD was a little harder to discern, but some of them, they were very explicit.
Right. And POD
so-
crossed over as well. I mean, they were on
They
MTV,
did, yeah.
were,
They
you
had
know,
some serious crossovers, yeah.
Which might
so
have been
they're maybe not the best
the reason
example
for that
because
crossover.
it's kind of hard to. Their stuff was a little bit more vague. There was a lot of that back in the day,
I mean, you might remember the whole Creed debacle because
Creed is
People-
Creed proved
people were
that
like-
the lyrics maybe just don't matter because
Right.
My Own Prison, I showed the kids that the other day.
Yeah.
And it's like not great theology, but it is
Right.
Christian stuff,
Yeah.
I mean, it's very like defeatist and like I'm in a prison because of my
Yeah.
own sin, gosh, have
Yeah.
you heard of forgiveness? Must have been, come from a pretty legalist background, but
yeah.
it is biblical stuff. I mean, he's using Bible terms and that there's not a bigger hit than that, that was
Right.
huge. So anyway, I don't know. Yeah, I think they proved that if you've got a great product and the messaging is, the people can accept certain messaging if the product's great,
Yeah. So really what I'm hearing from you is, I mean, which I don't know, but maybe the paradigm has shifted. Somebody trying to make art, the bravery of making what you want to make will nowadays pay off because of the internet. You're not trying to pander to maybe a big publisher or like as far as music goes,
Yeah.
you're not trying to get signed by a record deal. I mean, I don't think that the record executives in the business now know really what to do or what's going on because it's such a different market. But
Yeah.
but you're saying that having the bravery to make art that feels true to you and not just to pander to the wider audience, like you can actually find your audience these days.
I think you can,
that's
but
gonna
it
pay
is
off.
work. I
Yeah.
mean, it's not automatic. I mean, you don't just make a TikTok hashtag and it just works. I mean,
Right.
well, I mean, some people do. But, there's moments in culture where certain things are going to really work. And I think we saw that in early Christian rock music where you had like DC Talk and Newsboys and just a host of others, it was an explosion. And you could say, were they better than others that came after them? Not necessarily, I don't think. Now, they were good enough. And I think that's what matters, is being good enough, being at the right place at the right time, or some of that you can make up for in just working really hard to find the audience. But actually, it's really hard to replace right time, right place, right time. And they were, man. I mean, the Christians were ready to hear something that sounded like Silverchair, but something their parents would allow, know.
Right.
And so those were like youth group built bands in a way. They were like, it was the American youth group that made DC Talk multi-platinum or whatever they are.
Right.
Because it was something that felt like what you could get on the top 40 secular station, but it was for me, it was a special thing. And I'm still trying to figure out what that niche is in books, and I don't know exactly. I struggle to know exactly where to put the effort in, like advertising. Like we do advertise some, but it's with mixed results. It's like, there hasn't been one thing that has just really worked. We have had some success kind of build over time, but there's no just like boom, it's really working. It's like everything is a slog to get it out. Because what I'm doing is a little odd, and I don't think we've reached a tipping point where Christian sci-fi and fantasy is like a broad. Like if you look at the search terms on Google, there's not a lot of people searching that. Right. But I was one of them. I was one that would put that in Google occasionally. Like there's got to be something out there. I love sci-fi. I want to know. And I'm to the age now. I'm past being worried about whether people think it's nerdy to love Jesus. And it's like, I'll read about a preacher that's on a spaceship, that's like, that's cool to me now. Yeah. And whether it's cool to the kids or not is yet to be seen. We'll find out. But
like you said, you were the one out there looking for that. And I think there are people looking for that. I mean, I was the one, really, I mean, DC Talk and some of those Christian bands, it didn't really fill a gap for me, because I like Silverchair, I like things like that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's not good enough. Like, like what the Christian music industry, and which that is really who was putting it out there. There was money to be made. What they're putting out there, I'm like, I'm still not getting what I think is a good alternative rock band. Now there was a lot more, I think, metal bands, that kind of made it out, that were closer to maybe what's in the secular market. But I guess what you're saying about books resonates with me, because there was a gap for you, and you're like, I would read about this, and there, so you're trying to fill that gap and make those books. Yeah. But I know there are people out there who are looking for that, so I don't know how you find them.
And I'm trying to find them, I'm trying to figure out where they are, and but the communities that house those folks, they also house folks. Okay, so like there are some communities, and they're strong communities, but there's still that range that like Christian music had to go through of figuring out, are we singing Bible verses, or are we just singing about life, and it happens to be from a Christian worldview? Right. All of that has, but like by now, Christian music has kind of segmented itself into those. Mm-hmm. Like the worship kind of segment is a lot more likely to be hearing Bible verses and hearing just like really declarative, explicit lyrics about God. Right. Whereas there's still a market for, well, at least I assume there is still a market for kind of what I would call like worldview Christian music. That it's like, it's from a Christian worldview, but like what Switchfoot has spent most of their career doing. There's some explicit lyrics that are just very Jesus oriented, but a lot of it is just life stuff,
Sure.
And not much about girls. I mean, that's one of the big differences.
Right.
If you're doing Christian music, you probably, unless you're going to do endless albums about your wife, you really have to figure out how to sing about something else.
Right. Yeah.
And that's kind of a handicap for people that are coming from listening to Top 40, because it's all about terrible relationship mistakes that people have made. Right. That's the Top 40. It's all just,
right.
I can't figure out love. Well, Jesus helped us with that, and Christians are doing a pretty good, I think, a pretty good job of just like moving on to the next thing. Like, I've got my relationship sorted out, it's working, and let's,
right.
So.
But that's something that makes people feel it's like a point of drama, and which
absolutely.
brings emotion and things like that. So I understand why the top 40 is full of it, I guess. So you were talking about whatever you were talking about, your books, and so talk a little bit about the ministry that you found. I mean, so you were doing the videography work for, like you said, about 8 years. Started to write during that time, I would guess.
Yeah.
Met your wife during that time.
Mm-hmm.
And so tell me about the ministry that you're a part of now.
Yeah, so the ministry that I worked for was started by my father-in-law. He worked at a place called Missionary Tech Team for a long time, and eventually kind of went independent and started a small ministry that initially was to help missionaries do graphic design and any kind of media stuff. And when I married his daughter, she was working with the ministry. Maybe not when we married. Actually, after we married, she started working with the ministry. And then eventually, I started to see that it looked like fun, because they were doing media type stuff, and they were doing it for a good cause. But when I came on, I did not do that type of service bureau stuff very much. I did a little bit of it, but what I almost immediately started doing was, like, I had written, I think 3 books by that point. They weren't successes or anything, but I'd kind of gotten a feel for how to write long form. And so when I came into the ministry, what I told the team was, like, I would really like to be a content creator. I'd like to actually make the thing rather than helping other people make their thing. Mm-hmm. I want to be a content creator, and so I started in like doing infographics for online and blogs, and it built into writing like Bible study books and other kinds of materials. And it kind of came full circle to eventually sort of getting enough of a catalog where I was like, okay, so we've written some Bible study books. Now I'd like to sort of return back to sci-fi and fantasy, use the writing skills that I've kind of built up, but be very specific about the kind of message that we want to share. I'm not writing a Christian sci-fi to sell to billions of people. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to help people be clear on the gospel, be encouraged to be disciples. One of the guy we mentioned earlier, John Randall's phrases, which I loved, is be dangerous disciples. And like I really want to encourage people to do that. And someone that is versed in sci-fi, they maybe won't read a theology book or a Bible study book.
Sure.
But man, if it's got spaceships on the cover, they might read it. And so to me, there's this cool little niche there where like I get this opportunity to teach somebody something about the Bible or about the gospel, but I also get to play around in the sandbox, so to speak, to write about rockets and spaceships and space colonies on Mars and stuff like that, which is just really exciting to me. It kind of merges those different passions that I have, and I hope accomplishes something, that's spiritual in value or that's spiritually value, in the process. And so,
definitely,
it's a unique job, man. I mean, it's like not many people get to do what I'm doing, and it's such an amazing opportunity just from a writing standpoint to be a full-time, just to be a paid writer in the first place.
Yeah.
And also, here's the other amazing thing is I can write an obscure book that serves a certain purpose, and if it doesn't sell, that's okay, because I'm not being paid by book sales. We have supporters. We're basically media missionaries is what we are.
Okay, cool.
Who some of our time goes to trying and experimenting with things like Christian sci-fi, which is like, what mission organization in the world would let you do that? It's so unique,
Yeah.
I
think that,
anyway.
I think that maybe your ministry is not just so cookie cutter anyway, because
definitely
one of the early things that I saw that you guys had put out was modernized versions of gospel tracks. And if you've grown up in church, like you talked about the 90s, the old school gospel tracks were just weird.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, which I don't know who wrote those or made those.
Yeah.
I'm not trying.
They're probably written in the 30s or something.
I guess I am knocking them, but I mean, like they just looked weird, and nobody, is going to really. I mean, I can't say nobody, but who's going to pick one of those up and say, "Man, this is something I want to look at." And so your ministry, which I don't know who was driving on that, but you guys have really made some cool modern, gospel tracks, and I think that was cool. But
yeah, one of my favorites so that's one of our guys named John, who happens to be my father-in-law. He has made some really funny, which you don't think of gospel tracks as like being funny. He made one for Halloween time that's a zombie themed track, and he used the clever similarity between resurrection, the Christian idea of resurrection, and zombies who come back from the dead.
Yeah.
And it's got zombies on it, but they're like cartoony they're for kids. And his idea was brilliant, I thought. He kind of put together that, man, you've got people coming to your door asking for you to put something in their trick-or-treat bag.
Right.
Just put this track in their trick-or-treat bag, and it's Halloween themed. And so he's kind of created, he kind of went from there and created tracks for each holiday, like Easter eggs. He's got this itty bitty little track that he's made that will fit into an Easter egg. You can kind of fold it up, and it's just very clever the way that, and they're colorful and they're cartoony. And one of the things, the way I kind of think of them is they don't take themselves too seriously. Like the message is serious,
right?
But they're kind of cartoony in the sense that like I don't know if you remember those Chick tracks, which were kind of probably produced in the 50s, maybe what we grew up with. They were so serious. It's like people dying, getting drunk and dying and going to hell. And it's like
fear-based.
It's fear-based stuff.
Completely fear-based.
Maybe not all of them were, but like the ones I remember were. Yeah. And it's like, we're not doing that. We just want to be like an inflection point for a kid to just get them to start maybe asking questions about faith. It shares a very simplified, like John 3:16 concept. Jesus offers you eternal life. Believe in him, basically, and then it's done, and that's it. It's just it's that simple.
Yeah.
And so it's not fear based. It's fun based, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And I know some people don't like that, but like I like fun. I think the whole Christian thing is fun. It's an amazing ride. It's an amazing experience, and so I like that we're trying to reflect that in the materials that we make.
It's an engaging thing. I mean, in which I
hope
know
so.
that,
Yeah.
I know that a fear-based thing can be engaging as well, but I just think that this is a better way of engagement. I mean, you're going to pick something up that's colorful. It's cute. It looks modern. It's not fear-based. Yeah. I love it. So I thought that was brilliant.
Well, I appreciate that. That's props to John. He's good at that.
Props to John.
Yeah, and he came up doing puppet ministry. So he's done kids ministry for forever. He and his wife, my mother-in-law, like their first date was to go do puppet ministry somewhere.
No way.
So they just
that's great.
He's got so much experience on how to make kids laugh. He's got all of these puppets that people around East Texas, when they see him, will say, "Oh, you still got Pirate Pete, in action, or Fiorona, or whichever, his characters that he's kind of built over the years with these puppets." And what's funny about John is he's pretty quiet, but when you put a puppet on his hand, he's witty and he's got punchlines, and it's really fun to see. So the ministry was started kind of with that in mind, that it's okay to have fun. It's okay to give people a laugh, And so,
definitely.
So when I'm writing, there's a lot of that in there. I mean, I'm a silly person a lot of the time, and so the characters often sometimes they're kind of goofy, like the missionary to Mars has a space pirate, and there's no explanation for why he talks like a pirate. He's just in space, and and it sounds silly when I say it, but he's got some of the most poignant speeches in the whole thing. And I had a reviewer say this, that like I rolled my eyes when there was a guy like talking piracy, but talking pirate, but like through the book, I started to love that character. And then he had the most like important speeches of the whole thing. And so we start with silly, we start with fun, and hopefully we can turn it towards something that really matters.
Yeah.
That we're going to be in eternity together, and let's
Yeah.
think about what that means.
I think it's great, man. I think
and
it's great.
I think some of Jesus's stories, we read Jesus's parables with such a serious tone, but I kind of wonder if some of Jesus's stories were actually a little bit funny. Like you think about, you have a speck in your eye. I'm sorry, your brother has a speck in his eye, but you have a log in your eye. That's
Right.
funny. That's
Right.
a funny thing to say. Like, you have a log sticking out of your eye,
Right.
So there's little hints to me that even Jesus's stories had a sense of fun in them. That
Yeah.
people leaned in and probably laughed a little bit, and then it got serious, and they're like, whoa, he's expanding my mind with this
Yeah.
story, and I laughed a little bit,
Yeah.
So I love that. I love that approach, and we're trying to we're doing it imperfectly, but we're trying to figure out how to be better at that. So.
Well, it seems like you're doing really a modern, modified version of what a pastor is, what an evangelist is.
Yeah.
With the internet, like you guys have done overseas missions. You guys have done,
Yeah.
I mean, you do ministry in person, but you guys do a lot online. You're really
It's a lot
realizing
of internet, yeah.
that there are so many more people that you can reach through the internet.
Yeah.
And you guys did the kids show, I guess, during COVID.
Yeah.
You guys did an
Yeah.
online church during COVID.
Yeah.
Being a pastor and being online, I mean, how different is it? How different is your mindset than it would have been 30 years ago? I mean, and are you
Yeah.
still learning how to grow and change because of the online vehicle?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I sometimes say I'm a missionary to the indigenous people of the internet. And there's other people doing that too. I'm not the only one. There's a lot
Right.
that are really focused on reaching people online. But it's hard. I think it's hard to use the word pastor for what is actually happening online. I think you can be a preacher online, which to me is like a person who delivers a message. But to be a pastor takes interaction, and it doesn't have to be face to face, but you'd have to answer comments probably more than I do to be a good online pastor. And early on, I tried to do that, but it got overwhelming. I mean, we had a couple of videos, not a couple, we had a number of videos that just went too viral to be able to keep up with the amount of comments. Now, not everything we do is viral. I mean, I'll have videos sometimes that get 7 views,
Right.
But we had a few that went so viral, I could not keep up with the comments, and I sort of pulled out of some of that. And so I don't know how to deal with that. I don't know how to be like the kind of pastor that someone would need in a church. A single pastor can do a lot. Online, there's just so many people. The person to people ratio is so high. What I hope is that I'm part of the messaging pipeline that God would use for them. But I recognize that for like counseling and pastoring, they're going to need to still be at a local church.
Right. Right.
Maybe some of that could be supplemented by online groups, but I haven't seen evidence, in my opinion, I haven't seen evidence that there's a real replacement for like just being in a church. But with that said, people have so much access to teaching materials and internet-based topic concept videos and infographics and stuff like that. That's really the niche that I'm playing. So the way that I think of it, this helped me a lot to try to drill down to what my purpose is. And this is kind of came late in life for me. The purpose that I think my life is, the reason why I think I'm here is to point people toward Jesus. And I say that really broadly, like that could be just a slight course correction for somebody, or it could be a complete turnaround. I mean, it could be either of those, but I want to point people more toward Jesus, and I happen to be a media maker, so I want to make content that points people toward Jesus. And I also pastor people, but that's more in person. Like I do pastor a small church. It was a house church that's just recently kind of grown into this. Now we're renting some space and trying to figure that whole thing out.
Right.
So that's happening too. And that's a really different kind of relational tool set than what I'm using online. However, there have been some really neat pastoring relationships, I think, that have happened online and exclusively online. People I've never met, but for it to trigger that tool to be used for me online, a person has to pretty much send me a direct message, and then send me another message, and then send me another message. And I don't mean that I'm not responding. I just mean that I'll respond shortly, and then if they're still hungry and they respond again, then the relationship can grow. And I've had probably 10 to 15 of those over the years of people that a type of mentoring relationship has really grown through email. Not on the platforms usually, not on the social media, but they've usually found me through social media.
Right.
And then a lot of times it'll be email. Sometimes it will advance into like texting, and then every once in a while somebody, it might turn into a phone call kind of relationship. And so some of that's happening, but if you feel like you've got to like legitimately shepherd the 1,000 people that watched your video or whatever, it drives you nuts. I mean, you just can't.
Sure. Oh yeah.
You can't drink from a fire hose, you know. So
yeah.
So it's kind of like it's different footprints at different levels, you know. I may have for one of the 2 million people that saw the first video that we had that went viral, my influence in their life is actually pretty small. It lasted about 68 seconds, whatever that video was. But maybe one person from that entire group reached out and we built a friendship, you know?
Yeah.
And so my influence in their life is much larger.
Right.
And I kind of see that modeled in Jesus' ministry. He would tell stories to big crowds that were mysterious. And a lot of the people would go away. And they just be like, oh man, he's a good storyteller. Cool. Where's lunch? You know?
Right.
And they go away. But a few would come and ask questions.
Right.
A few would kind of lean in and say, what did that mean? And then the disciples especially, he would have even extended sessions with them that was just really personal, you know. And so I think there's a precedent for realizing that you're going to have lots of influence with a small number of people, and you could have small influence with a large number of people. But if you have to pick the high influence with a small number of people. It's so valuable, you know. And so this is where it's upside down for me, and it's something that I struggle with. And I think it really is my sin nature. My sin nature wants millions of people to adore me. You know?
Sure.
My sin nature wants to be on stage. My sin nature, but also my godly part wants to reach people.
Right.
But I think my godly part, the part that God has put in me, would be content with, well, that can be one person, and that's okay.
Right.
It's my sin nature that takes that and kind of twists it and say, well, it's not good enough unless it's a million people.
The numbers need to be higher.
The number needs to be high. Yeah, my views, my likes, whatever.
You know,
and so that's one of the things I'm challenged with is how do we prioritize the things that really do matter to the Lord more?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm working on it. I mean, you guys are probably wrestling with the same thing because y'all have had some serious viral moments, you know. I mean, actually, I would say y'all are having a viral trend. I think it looks to me like y'all are moving in a very viral way, you know.
Not me. I mean, you're talking about my wife on social media, which she does such good content, you know. And,
she does, but I mean, you've had some. I mean, haven't you had a couple
hundred views? A couple hundred views, man. I don't know.
Oh, come on. You're being modest.
But no, I mean, I do get that. I feel like, though, you being called to being a pastor, I feel like that's even a more unique thing. And it's so interesting because, you know, I think that we are so, maybe a lot of people are so drawn to, I'm going to do my church online, you know, drawn to kind of the more like, well, I'm just going to be in my house. I'm an introvert type thing.
Yeah.
You know, and as you were speaking, it just made me think, I wonder, I mean, obviously God has known how things are going to be on this earth forever, right? We don't read the Bible thinking that, well, he knew about the internet and he knew about this age. But whenever, I guess it was Paul, was it Paul who said, you know, do not forsake the meeting together with the saints.
Yeah.
I think, you know, I mean, God was speaking through him about this time.
That's a
about,
great point.
about
Yeah,
the
that's
fact
a great
that, like,
point.
yeah, you can
Yeah.
have an online church and basically be a mega church online, and,
Yeah.
and have all these other, brothers and sisters that you're a part of a body with. But is it really going to be good, true, fruitful ministry? Really, he said, don't forsake meeting together
Yeah.
with people. And I think that, man, he was saying that about today. So
Yeah. No, that's that's
that
a
can
really
be
good point.
a good
Yeah, it's not
guide
like
for us.
the internet surprised him or something. It's like,
Right,
oh yeah, except for
right.
that. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right, yeah.
I think we're
So-
still called to meet together. The one way you could think of it is like there is a precedent for your Christian education to happen apart from your church. So like some people go to Bible college, but that doesn't mean they don't go to church. I think the internet can be like Bible college. You can get teaching on the internet. You can get some form of so let's say that you have a sickness that keeps you in your bed, and you cannot get out of your bed. Well, you could supplement. You could get a type of fellowship. It's
Sure.
better than not having it at all.
Right.
But if you are capable of physically fellowshipping, because think about what it seems like what the Bible's saying. If somebody is a shut-in, people need to visit them. Why? Because they need some in-person fellowship.
Right. Right.
But just by nature of the limitations, that person is probably going to feel lonely and going to need more interaction. And the online component can supplement that to some extent.
Sure.
So also, if somebody's isolated, if they live in a place that's very remote,
Sure.
There's value with it, but it isn't. And I can speak from experience because we tried online church for
Right.
quite a while, and it is not a replacement for being in person. It's valuable. But it's not a replacement for being in person. And one of the reasons is I can turn you off immediately if I get upset. But if you're face to face, there's all kinds of interpersonal expectations. And sometimes we need to hear each other say things that we don't want to hear. But because we have kind of like politeness ingrained in us, we'll listen. And we'll get the
Right.
message in ways that we just don't do online. You can just retreat so easily. And I think that's why.
That's so true.
Yeah,
So true.
I think it's why we still have to meet in person. But
that.
does all the teaching have to happen in person? I would lean towards saying no, not necessarily. In fact, I could see a model working where you say we're going to always absolutely have our fellowship in person, but we'll allow some of our teaching to happen online while you're driving to work. Like, why
Sure.
not be efficient? Put it in a podcast and you
Yeah.
can listen to it. I don't see a problem with that. Because that's just a listening thing anyway. You're just sitting and listening to a sermon. So I think part of our confusion is that in the late 1700s, early 1800s, our church model started to turn into kind of a tent revival model where one person stands up and teaches.
Yep.
Now, when Paul said, don't forsake the meeting together, he was actually talking about something that looks a lot more like a church model. But in anything that your church is, you ought to be at. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
But this model of one guy talking and everybody sit quietly and listen, I think that's what turns some people off, and that's
Sure.
what they've abandoned. I don't think anybody wants to abandon good fellowship.
Right.
But if a church doesn't have opportunities for good fellowship, and the only thing they do for church is one dude standing at the front talking, well, you can understand why some people don't want to go to do that,
Sure, yeah.
because they're not getting fellowship. They want fellowship, sometimes first and foremost. So,
But I do think that is probably what a lot of churches have put forward as this is church.
This is church,
I mean,
yeah.
This is the
Yeah.
big show. This is what church looks like, and it's, like, well, when was that ever established? So, but yeah, interesting, man. Interesting. So,
But
okay,
but see, even in that situation, if you go into a church, and let's say you go into a church where it's a big church, one guy talks, you sit and listen, but let's say you sit in roughly the same area of the sanctuary every week, guess what happens? You generally are going to meet people and that sit
True.
near you, and you're going to
True.
wind up kind of having your own little community of people, as long as you're open and you're not like sucking the life out of everybody around you with
Right.
your grump attitude. You really can have fellowship even in that environment, and so
Right.
even that environment offers you something that you don't get if you stay home. And so,
Yeah, very
obviously, I'm a
interesting.
big proponent of just do church in some form, or just
Sure.
do. You got to be doing church if you want to be healthy.
Well, that's a good point, though, because I think that most people think, well, my church, I could just look at it online and just see what I'm seeing in my chair. But
Yeah.
I mean, you're not even. I mean, that's something that I never thought about. Just showing up, just those few moments of everybody getting settled and
Yeah.
and leaving. I mean, you're gonna have some fellowship there, and so
Yeah.
that's something that people probably don't even think about. So that's
Yeah.
a great point, actually.
And I kind of miss so like when I was younger, I worked in Baptist churches, and they usually had a meet and greet time, and we would sometimes roll our eyes. However, it did get us to learn the names of the people around us and
Yep.
to have a conversation with them, and then it became a lot easier. Like you wouldn't have a conversation at that moment usually.
Right.
But it made it a lot easier to then talk to them after church or before
Yeah.
church the next week or whatever. And so like even though people groan about that, I think it's I think that's a valuable practice
Yeah.
if your church has gotten to the size where you're not having natural fellowship
Yeah.
between the people because like it can get to the size where you really do have to pipe people in and out of the room
Sure.
somewhat quickly, and they don't have anywhere else to go other than their cars. And so it's like
Right.
we need each other we need each of us to be getting to know the folks around us. So,
Right.
do
I
y'all
agree.
do y'all do that at y'all's church?
There's not like a meet and greet time
Yeah.
at our church, but I mean, as as people come in, I mean, there's a lot of fellowship going on, but no, there's not a meet and greet time, which I grew up with that,
Yeah.
and a lot of people, like you said, roll their eyes at it, but
Yeah.
it really doesn't take long to have some meaningful connection with people. Like you
Yeah,
said, you're not
that's
having a
true.
conversation, but yeah, I do think that there's importance to that, and maybe that's missing in a lot of modern churches these days. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, man,
Yeah, it's easy to come in, go out, and just not connect, But
Yep.
but even in that situation, I still would say you are at least around other believers. There's
Sure,
at least
yeah.
the potential to connect. So I'm
Sure.
still like, it's still better to be there, even
Sure,
if you just
sure.
you roll in and roll out and go to the Golden Corral after. I mean, it's like you're at least because then you might see a face you recognize from church in town, and then
Sure.
you have a moment of connection. So I don't know. I just
No,
like
exactly. I mean, there are greeters at my church who are, elected officials in the county and in town,
yeah.
and people,
Yeah.
and so yeah, sure. If you just see the guy holding the door open for you every Sunday and smile at him, that's some kind of connection, that like.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I see importance in that, but
Yeah. Which, by the way, we really liked y'all's church. We were visiting churches a while back, and we
Yeah.
came to y'all's church. Really, what we were doing is we were going to a lot of churches one time in a consecutive row. We kind of had a sense that we were going to probably start a church at some point,
Yep.
but we wanted to get some experience of just seeing what others were doing in town. And we found so y'all are at First Baptist Hallsville. Y'all are still there, right?
yep. Mhm.
So it felt kind of like
There's
home
no-
for us. There's no what?
Well, no, there's no controversy in saying that we're still there. There's nothing.
You're still there. Yeah, you haven't left.
Yeah, that's all good.
Yeah, unless you do in the next before you get this edited. But it was just very friendly because I mean a lot of people that like we walked in and realized we know a bunch of people here.
Yeah.
And it was just
Yep.
it was a sweet get together with some really long-term friends that we hadn't seen in a while.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, same with us. I mean, we weren't drawn in by the perfection of the production or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's all about the heart and like just feeling like the Lord has worked in these people and
Yeah.
they are wanting to shine His light, wanting to fellowship with us, and so a lot of personal connection there too
Yeah.
with us. But man, probably need to do a part 2 on this. I mean, let's
that'd be cool.
let's wrap it up. But first, I want you to tell people how to find your work, your ministries,
yeah.
whatever it is, social media,
me put my
website,
glasses
whatever you
on.
want to put on, man.
I could share my screen and show you what.
Oh yeah, please do.
I think I can. Let me see.
Think
We
I
did it
can.
earlier to figure out
did.
this. Okay, so I'll just show. This is some of my books.
Okay.
The one I mentioned, Missionary to
Missionary,
Mars,
okay.
is there.
Now, what website is this, Lucas?
Oh, sorry. This is lucaskitchen.com.
Okay.
That's my personal author site. We also have a site for our ministry, which is freegrace.in.
Okay.
But this is my particular books that I've written, and you can.
I didn't know
link
you've
out
written
to-
so many. Look at that.
Yeah,
you've written more,
I've got
actually.
a lot more that are not on here yet. These,
Wow.
I wanted to put the fiction ones on here first because this summer we're doing kind of a tour where we're going to some different Christian book conferences and stuff.
Oh,
And
cool.
So
Okay.
I've really been working on this site to get get that
Great.
ready. But anyway, yeah, I've probably written 19 or 20 books, different lengths. Not all of them are like massive tomes or anything, but
Sure.
as you can tell from this, words just sort of flow out of me. They're not always good words. Sometimes they're even cuss words, but
We haven't heard one of those yet.
yeah, we haven't heard one of those.
Maybe you could throw
But,
one of those in just toward the end.
But yeah, so a lot
lucaskitchen.com,
of writing over the
and
years.
then-
lucaskitchen.com, yeah.
And
And
the ministry is
yeah,
Free
that
Grace.
is freegrace.in.
IN. Cool.
And it's got blogs and it's got books too. You can get our books there, but it's also got blogs. It's got podcasts. It's really kind of it's got a lot of videos, some that I've made, some that other team members have made. So it's got lots of stuff. If you can get subscribed to freegrace.in, and whenever we make something new, whether it's a blog or a book or whatever, emails go out to let folks know about that.
Cool.
So,
Cool. I love it, man.
that'd be cool if folks want to subscribe or just kind of see what we have going on. There's lots of interesting topics on there. So
I love it, man. Great. Well, Lucas, thanks for being on. Thanks for giving me some time with you.
Yeah.
And I want to do more. There's so much we can talk about, and just not enough time in the day. So we're going to do another part if you'll allow it.
I'd love it. That'd be fun.
Cool, man.
Yeah.
All right. See you later.
Thanks, man.